Hello and welcome to the Dollar Store Oreo Show. Today we'll be covering the different types of tissues. Now here we have the classic white tissue from Kleenex. Now this tissue has a nice smooth, tender, and sorry, I need to take this call. Hello? Oh, wait, what? This is the wrong script? Wait, what? Oh, okay, well, whatever. Send me the new one. So apparently the things we're talking about are these weird fleshy things made of cells. So whatever, let's begin. So these slabs of cells are split into four different categories, which are epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscular tissue, and nervous tissue, which all, except nervous tissue, which is a loser, have many, many subcategories. God, they have so many. To begin, we'll be diving into the wonderful world of epithelial tissues. Epithelial tissues cover outside the body and line organs as well as vessels and cavities. Their first function is to absorb, secrete, and excrete various substances. They are also the first line of defense against bacteria, viruses, etc. Basically, they're the bodyguards for your, body. As mentioned before, they can be found in the mouth, the skin, and many, many more locations. There are 8 subcategories of epithelial tissue, which are simple squamous, simple cuboidal, simple columnar, pseudostratified ciliated columnar, stratified squamous, stratified columnar, and transitional epithelium. Simple squamous is like the bouncer. It lets in materials the body needs and filters out the trash trying to get in. It can also secrete a lubricating substance, but no one cares about that part. Simple cuboidal literally just secretes and absorbs. It's so boring. Simple columnar also absorbs, but it also secretes mucus and enzymes. Pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium also secretes mucus. I'm starting to see, a pattern here. Stratified squamous epithelium, now this is an interesting one, protects underlying tissues. For once, it doesn't just secrete mucus. And now we have the copycat, stratified cuboidal epithelium, which its function again is protection. I thought protection was cool, but now I've had like 4 in a row. And now, here we go, stratified columnar epithelium. Can you guess what this does? It protects and it secretes. A 2-in-1 deal. Now, finally, last but not least, we have the transitional epithelium, which protect the urinary system against the toxic effects of urine, and they can stretch to accommodate the volume of the bladder and other organs when they fill with liquid. Alright, now that we've finished that wonderful experience of epithelial tissues, let's take a 5-second mental reset break. Okay, back to work. Next, we're doing the connective tissues. We're going to start with loose connective tissue. It's the most common type of connective tissue. It holds organs in place, it attaches epithelial tissue to other tissues. Loose connective tissue is made of 3 fibers. The first of which is collagenous fiber, which is made of collagen, obviously, and it helps to strengthen connective tissue. The second is elastic fibers, which are made of the protein elastin and are stretchable, surprisingly. They give the connective tissue elasticity. Last but not least for loose connective tissue is reticular fibers, which join connective tissues to other tissues. Alright, now let's move on to dense connective tissue. Now, this can be found in tendons and ligaments. This helps attach muscles to bones and links bones together. Now, dense connective tissue has 3 categories: dense regular, dense irregular, and elastic. We're going to start with dense regular, which, for example, would be a tendon or a ligament. Next is dense irregular. Much of the dermis layer of the skin is made of dense irregular connective tissue. The membrane surrounding several organs is also dense irregular tissue. Next is elastic, which, surprisingly, is a tissue which enables stretching and things that need it, such as vocal cords, trachea, bronchial tubes, etc. Now, don't get too comfortable, for we have another one, specialized connective tissues. There are several specialized connective tissues, such as adipose tissue, cartilage, bone tissue, and blood and lymph tissues. Adipose tissue stores fat, and it lines the organs and body cavities, protect organs, and insulate against heat loss. Next up is cartilage, a fibrous connective tissue that is composed of packed collagenous fibers and a rubbery gelatinous substance called chondrin. Cartilage also provides flexible support for certain structures such as nose, trachea, and ears. There are three different types of cartilage: hyaline cartilage, fibrocartilage, and elastic cartilage. Hyaline cartilage is the most common and is found in areas such as trachea, ribs, and nose. It's flexible, elastic, and surrounded by a dense membrane called perichondrium. Elastic cartilage contains elastic fibers and is the most flexible type of cartilage, surprisingly. It is found in locations such as the ears and voice box. Now we continue onto bone tissue. Bone is a type of mineralized connective tissue that contains collagen and calcium phosphate. Calcium phosphate gives the bone its firmness. There are two types of bone tissue: spongy bone tissue and compact bone tissue. Spongy bone tissue is the first type of bone formed during bone formation and is surrounded by compact bone. It has a bunch of large spaces and it contains blood vessels and bone marrow. Compact bone is strong, dense, and forms a hard outer bone surface. Small canals within the tissue allow for a patch of blood vessels and nerves. Last but not least, we have the blood and lymph tissues. Now, surprisingly, blood is also considered to be a type of connective tissue. It serves to connect other organ systems together by supplying them with nutrients and transporting signal molecules between cells. Lymph is another type of fluid connective tissue. It's a clear fluid which originates from blood plasma and contains immune cells that protect the body against pathogens. We finally finished connective tissues. That took actually forever, so let's have a 10-second break this time. Muscle tissue is a specialized tissue found in animals which functions by contracting, which applies force to different parts of the body, allowing movement. There are three different types of muscle tissue found in animals, which differ slightly, although they still function in a similar way. The three subcategories of muscle tissue are skeletal muscle tissue, cardiac muscle tissue, and smooth muscle tissue. Skeletal muscle tissue is a type of striated muscle, meaning it has microscopic bands, allowing the muscle to contract and release quickly. If you couldn't tell by the name, most skeletal muscle tissues are attached to bones. Next up on the chopping block is cardiac muscle tissue. Cardiac muscle tissue is a specialized type of muscle tissue that forms in the heart, surprisingly. This muscle tissue contracts and releases involuntarily and is responsible for keeping the heart pumping blood around the body. Cardiac muscle is also striated. Last but not least is smooth muscle tissue. Unlike cardiac and skeletal muscle tissue, smooth muscle tissue has no striations. In smooth muscle, contractions are not quick and rapid, but rather smooth and continuous. Smooth muscle is found surrounding many organs, blood vessels, and other vessels used for transporting fluids. Nervous tissue surprisingly makes up the nervous system. There are two types of nervous tissue: neurons and neuroglia. Neurons are cells that can transmit signals called nerve impulses. Neurons can look very different from each other, but they all have components in common. Each neuron has a soma that contains a nucleus, dendrites, finger-like projections that receive nerve impulses, and an axon. And neuroglia provide support for these neurons by providing them with nutrients and anything else they need. Now we're going to do a quick segment on scars. A scar is an area of fibrous tissue that replaces normal skin after an injury. Scar tissue is composed of the same protein, collagen, as the tissue it replaces. Scars look different from regular skin because the fiber composition is different. Instead of a random basket weave formation, collagen fibers normally do in a regular tissue, the collagen cross-links and forms in a single direction. Thank you for watching, and I'm very surprised this was below 10 minutes.